Fans of AuthentiKit, thank you for joining me again. This is what we're building today. It is a Spitfire Lower Panel providing the all-important boost coil and engine starter buttons. They've got a lovely tactile feel, and finally you can start the Spitfire properly by pressing both buttons at the same time. AuthentiKit is a freeware project. We're creating flight controls for a wide range of aircraft with an initial focus on vintage warbirds, followed by vintage and classic general aviation. We're harnessing the power of 3D printing in conjunction with high quality but low cost components like Hall sensors and sealed bearings. All flight controls can be assembled at your kitchen table with no workshop tools, no soldering and no metal work. You can source the parts yourself, or third parties are providing kits of all the hardware as well as 3D printed parts. And this is what it looks like mounted together with the blind flying panel and the flaps lever. Now you may mount it differently if you're building, say, a bespoke Spitfire cockpit, but one of the principles of AuthentiKit is that you need nothing more than an ordinary table or a desk to quickly clamp this cockpit to, and at the end I'll show you that assembly process. You don't actually need to have built the blind flying panel to use this lower panel, because the blind flying panel simply slots in or out as a separate piece from the lower panel. But you do need this instrument panel mounting system, unless you've got a bespoke cockpit. I'll include a link to this mounting system and the video for the assembly of it in the description. And if you're brand new to AuthentiKit, you will also need one of these universal hubs in its full configuration form, as the panel plugs into this socket H7. And if you remember, we've already used H8 for the gun sight. So this video is actually a big milestone for AuthentiKit, as we have now used up every available input on the Leo Bodner circuit board which is inside this box. Don't worry, we will expand it in time, as there is an alternate configuration of the circuit board which we'll be using for version 2 of the Universal Hub, but that will come later. So right now, as of March the 11th, 2023, version 1 of the AuthentiKit Spitfire Mark 9 home cockpit is complete. And I'll just recap on what is included. Starting from H1, we have the flight stick. H2 is the throttle input. H3, elevator trim. H4, the rudder bias. H5, the flaps lever. H6, the gear, although that's a generic term, it's the chassis lever in Spitfire terminology. H7 is an input for radiators, cowl flaps, or a general two-way for the Spitfire Mark 9. That is the lower panel, providing engine start and boost coil. H8 provides the gun sight input, although we're very close now to having a set of rudder pedals for the Spitfire. Fully 3D printed rudder pedals. So if you're not that bothered about the gun sight, you can use H8 to drive those rudder pedals. H9 and H10 are miscellaneous / spare, but it doesn't mean they're not usable at all. The BBMF, for example, are going to be using these for the fuel cock and the magneto, because they're not bothered about using the machine gun and cannon from the flight stick, so that we're going to take those two inputs, carry them across to MISC 1, and they're not bothered about the push to torque / bomb button on the throttle, so that can go across to MISC 2. So that's a way you can make full use of the 10 inputs if you want a different kind of configuration. By the way, if you'd like one of these top plates with the printed labels, it's printed as a 2-layer 3D print. So it's printed black, then you do a filament change, and then you can print the lettering in a different color. If you'd like that, I will release it soon. I just need to make a few tweaks first. But what about these dimmers, you may be asking? Well, I'm afraid, as I just said, we are maxed out now with no available inputs. However, in this video, I will be wiring them up, and I'll be providing a socket to plug them into a universal hub. So if you're handy at DIY, you can configure a second hub or some other solution to take that input. I've even designed this lower panel with a slot here to run the wires from the flying panel, the blind flying panel, so that you can take the gyro and the altitude adjustment knobs, take the input from those, because there are encoders built into that flying panel, take the wires through there, and you can share the RJ45. There's some spare capacity on the channels for that. So if you're happy with all of that, and you want to know how to build this, here we go. To build the Spitfire lower panel, you will need a bunch of printed parts and a small number of fairly low price commodity switches and hardware, and just a few screws. Now, where do you get these, you may ask? Well, most people watching this video will print their own on a 3D printer, typically an Ender 3 V2, costing around £200 or $200. You'll need the print files to print these, and they're free to download from AuthentiKit.org. The link is in the description. The download also includes a list of all the parts that you need, with links to where you can source these parts. Most of them are cheap. These tact switches, for example, are like a couple of pounds each. However, unfortunately, one or two things, like these springs, you do get hit hard for the postage. There isn't a kind of cheap eBay option for some of these. So it's often better to buy a kit from our friends at SimKit Supplies. For the big popular controls, they offer an all-in-one kit with everything you need in one small box. That's true for the flight stick, for example. However, for smaller projects like this, they offer construction kits. Construction Kit 1 contains all the hardware and the electronics for this project, and Construction Kit 2 contains all the screws. They actually contain a lot more than is needed for just this lower panel, but if you want to build throttles, trim wheels and more as well, then they are great value for money. The download also includes this assembly guide and this wiring diagram. So let's start by working our way through the steps. This is a great project to do, by the way, at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, and it only takes about 45 minutes. So let's go through the steps now. Okay, step 1. Apply white silicone or cork to the lettering before assembly. Now this is actually optional, and I've just told you it takes 45 minutes to do this. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't take 45 minutes if you do step 1, because you'll need to put white silicone in and allow it to go off and set. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll carry on with step 2. And you can choose to do it. If you're flying in VR and you're not going to see these things anyway, then there isn't the greatest need. It certainly looks nicer if you do. I'm not going to take you through that process, but I will include a link in the description which explains how to do this white silicone, this white fill-in process. Okay, step 1 complete. A little bit rushed. I think you could probably do better, but all the same, rather nice, I think. Right, let's do step 2. We're going to fit 2 M3 flange screws to the case. There's the case, these are the flange screws. So these are the jointing posts, which will go here and one here. Don't tighten them down, just put them in for now. Right, number 3, fit the case to the lower panel. So that's the lower panel. That's the case. And fit it with 6 M4 8mm countersunk screws. Now the way around it goes is this, so that you've got that flush to the right hand side, and this open bit is on the left hand side. So we need the 8mm. So those are the 8mm. Don't confuse them with the 6mm. There's a handy device for measuring screws which comes with the kit. You can use that. And let's get these in. Okay, there we go. They should go in nice and tight. Good firm grip. Great. Okay, number 4, fit an encoder. So there's an encoder to the starboard dimmer top. So that's a dimmer top. They're identical, but we're going to use that for starboard. Right, it goes in like that. When you get these, by the way, these legs at the bottom, they're sticking up. You just flatten them down, and then the pins here, just fold those to about 45 degrees so that they're kind of like that. In fact, what I find in practice is I sort of pop this out again. to do the connecting, but just sort of put it in place for now. So our great friend the ferrule. There we go. This is how I do it. So as I said, sort of pop the encoder slightly out. It's still kind of useful to keep it in the top here just because it sort of holds it in place a bit. And slide 3 ferrules. I don't have the best eyesight, but with plenty of light it's not that difficult. So, okay, that's 3 ferrules over there. And you can just sort of sit that like that while you're working on things. Okay, now number 6, we fit and crush 3 10cm long pieces of wire. The color order is yellow, black, green. I've stripped off some insulation, about sort of 4 or 5 mil. Give them a good twist. That's slightly too long. I'm just going to trim it back a little bit. So, and that one, I think we should be okay there. Okay, in the order, yellow, black, green. So let's hold it like this and slide the yellow through the top of the ferrule, like that. That's yellow. And black. And then the green. Okay. Watching carefully that we don't want any stray wires. Now let's press the encoder into its seat. Push the wires into the channels so that they're somewhat gripped in place while we do the crushing, so they don't pop out. Okay. And another check. Yep, nothing is splaying out. And then this is something you can do if you just sort of sit the dimmer and the encoder in place there, then you can get a good crush. Number 7, fit these 3 wires into the slot of the dimmer body, and that's this, and bring the body and top together. So the way to do this is to keep the right order. I'm going to hold that there so they don't ping out. I'm making it slightly more difficult because I've got some exposed ends already, but if you haven't stripped the ends off, you'll find these going a bit more easily. Okay, now we can just pull it together. Fold that over. There we go. That's what we're trying to do. And now we join the top and the body together with 3 M4 20mm. Yeah, that's a 20mm countersunk screws. Okay, that's one dimmer done. Number 9 is to repeat that for the port dimmer, but using a wiring order of white, black and red. Okay, so I've just finished the port dimmer. That's the one with the white, black, red wiring. So that's the port for there, that's the starboard for there. Next step, fit the dimmers to this lower panel with 6 of these M3, they're round-headed 8mm screws. So there we go, the port's the one with the red. We'll put that like that first, then we'll put the other one in. Put the have it so that the wires are pointing to each other, so it'll be like that orientation. So let's do the port one. Flip that over. Okay, that's one in. The other 2 will be easy now. Okay, there we go. That was number 10. Number 11, fit the dimmer knobs. This is fun, isn't it? So they just go on like this and clip on. Okay, there they go. Great. Okay, number 12, joint these 2 black wires with a third 10cm black wire at this top right post. So when you're jointing things, you take a good strip of insulation and then twist all the wires together like this. And then make a clockwise little crook out of them, like that. Good little crook. And then you can slide that underneath this jointing post. There we go, is that visible? Yep, it's underneath the post. And keep it under the flange as you get that gripped. Okay, that's well in there. These can wait for later. Now number 13, we're going to assemble Minic buttons. Now the Minic button is an evolution of the clinch button, which was so called because it used a self-clinching standoff. And this is the mini clinch button, which I'm shortening to the Minic button. And that's the body of it, so that's a Minic body. And the bits that go into it are the head and then the cap, and they vary depending on what sort of button you're making. So we're going to make one for the boost coil and one for the engine starter. One thing to say about this Minic button is that you really need to use the AuthentiKit standard calibration. That's not true calibration, that's a kind of undersize, oversize. It's an oversized hole and an undersized outer perimeter, and it allows things to fit together and even slide. So make sure that's right or the buttons will stick. So let's go through the steps. Right, we fit a standoff through the Minic body, so it goes like that. And this is where you'll find straight off if it's tight, which means you've got your calibration wrong. It doesn't really matter if it even drops out, but you don't want it tight. Second, slide the spring over the top of the Minic body. That's this. That's the spring. Now take a Minic head, which is that, and put an M3 countersunk screw through it. Screw the head to the body. There you go, you just let the screw catch and then it pulls, and that should move very freely. Now fit a tact switch to the base of the Minic body. Now a fresh tact switch looks like that. That's how they come. They've got the legs pointing down and the legs have got a little kink in them, and the way we prepare them is we point them up for this, or in fact initially we have one pair out and also flat. Take the kink out, and the way to do that is to sort of put it over some surface and just kind of crush the kink out of it. So you have a couple of the legs sticking out nice and flat and a couple of the legs doubling back on themselves. So that's how you want that. So there's one prepared to go into the Minic body. It goes in like this with, you can see that there's two channels, and then on the opposite side there are not any channels, but there are some slots in there. And when you put the Minic, when you put the tact switch in, it goes like that, and the legs drop in, and then these two legs stick out like that. So I'm making the engine starter Minic button first. That's green and black. I've got two wires. I've stripped off about 4 mil of insulation. I've twisted it, given a very good twist. That stops all the frays from spilling out. And I'm going to slide a ferrule over it. Like that. And then, and this is what you need to do for the Minic button, it's not the way we did it for the clinch button, double back the wire. So that kind of stops it dropping off. In fact, I'll do the other one as well. Over with the ferrule and double it back. Okay? Now slide the wires over the leg, but not like that, which is how I think we did a previous button. It's going to be the opposite way, so that both the leg and the wire go in the same way. Okay, like that. Just make sure that frayed stuff isn't sticking out. A trick is if you bend the ferrule over at kind of 90 to the wire, it exposes the hole underneath it, and then you can slide it over the leg like that. Okay, they're both on, so that's how they need to be. And then bend these legs upwards, tight against the body, and now we can crush the ferrules. Ideally, we don't want any of the legs protruding and sticking out and creating sort of some friction when we slide this into the barrel. Right, that's one done. Oh, one thing, final one, step I, holding the tack switch with your fingers so it doesn't pop out, press the head, and after the travel, which is about 2 mil, yeah, you can just hear the tack switch click. If you don't hear it click, then you've got a printing error, and this isn't going to press, it's not going to function, but that's working great. So that is a Minic button for the engine starter. I'll make another one now for the boost coil, and the boost coil needs 20 centimeters of yellow and black. So there we go, 2 Minic buttons wired up. We have the green and black, that's the engine starter, and then the longer wires which are on the boost coil. Let's go to step 14. Slide the wires of the boost coil, right, we'll go this one, through one of the BC898 barrels. Now it's so called because this was designed by Harry Armstrong, and I think this is an exact copy, or a very, very close copy, of an authentic RAF part, presumably numbered 5C898. He's a stickler for authenticity, Harry. We could probably got away with something simpler, or more basic, but this looks closer to the real thing. Anyway, that's what you do. You slide those wires through that slot there. You can see them come out the back. And then we just slide the... Now there's guide rails. See the little groove on the side here? There's guide rails, and there are rails inside the barrel, and then we just slide that in carefully. Don't push on the top, because that would push the tact switch out and sort of loosen things. In fact, it should just go in fairly easily. So that's one in. Okay, number 15, we're going to slide a shim over the top of that Minic button. It's also got guide rails, so align them the same way that the guide rails were on the button. So over the top, and it may be helpful just to have a little screwdriver to push things down and align the rails. There we go. Just goes like that. Oh, the shim's got a flat base and a little slopey top. So the slopey top needs to be upwards. Alright, number 16. Screw the barrel onto an ignition plate. So there's the ignition plate. Until there is some tightness, but it shouldn't go all the way. So about that, there's a good mil of clearance. So that's number 16 done. Right, repeat the steps 14, 16 for the engine starter Minic button. Okay, they're both finished. Right, number 18, which is to fit the ignition lids, which are these, to the engine starter and boost coil faces. And that's with more of these M3 screws, so they just go like this. Okay, that's 18 done. And we've done both of them now. So boost coil on the right, engine on the left. This is the boost coil cable with the longer leads. Starter has the shorter leads. Now we're going to slide that barrel into that face, and we have to do it with the, as it says here, with the nick pointing down. Now, I've got a little scratch in here. You've got a designed nick that I've modified, and I haven't printed out that version, so you've got a better version. And that will allow you to orientate this correctly, because it looks as though it's entirely symmetrical, but it's not. It'll only go properly in one orientation, and with the nick at the bottom you'll get it right. So you do that, and then you drop the whole unit into the right hand side here, like that, and then more of the M3 8mm will hold it in place. Okay, so that is the boost coil button done. One bit to do is to add the little cap on top of that, that button there, but we'll do that in a second. But that's working nicely, isn't it? I'll repeat that on the left hand side for the starter. Okay, there we go. That's 19 and 20 done, and then 21 is to fit the Minic head caps. These are the caps. There are 3 tiny notches. You probably can't even see them on the video here, but as you put the cap in, you'll find there's a certain orientation where it fits, and then they'll hold firmly in place. And there we go. Got a lovely button press action, and the caps fit over the top. The lids fit nicely over the top. 22. Slide the boost coil wires through the channel in the case. These are the boost coil wires, and you might be able to just see it. In here is the channel. Let's do one at a time. Like that. There we go. It's not too difficult. 22 is another jointing exercise, so there's the jointing post. I've already stripped off plenty of insulation from this engine starter, black, and then we need to take, there we go, chunk off the boost coil, and we need a third wire, just a short 10 centimeter black wire, and we join all these up. And the little clockwise crook and then joint it around that post. 24. Insert the RJ45 jacks into the back of the case, like that. And that. 25. Insert the ball plungers into the case, like that. Now 26 is we're going to wire up the ignition, which is the boost coil and engine starter RJ45, as per this wiring diagram. So it's black, then we leave a space, then yellow, then a space, then green. I suggest that you do it this way. Turn it that way round, sit the unit facing you, and then we can get the right order, left to right, of that RJ45. So the first one is the black. There it is. Pop that in there. Then a space, then the yellow. Space, then the green. That looks good. Clamp that down. Dimmer next. This time it's black, yellow, green, white, red. So no spaces this time. So black. Now before I close this up, let me point something else out, because you can see there are 3 more channels available in the dimmer RJ45, and of course we know there are channels available in the ignition RJ45. And in the back here there is a slot, a deliberate slot, to allow you to run wires from the blind flying panel, because the blind flying panel has a working encoder which will allow you to adjust the gyro and also to adjust the altitude calibration. So you could run those wires in there if you like and use those channels if you have the capability to support that RJ45. So let's close that up and carefully tuck these wires out of the way. Okay, and finally we need M4 6mm countersunk screws. And there it is, folks, the Spitfire lower panel. We have port floodlights, starboard floodlights, engine and boost starter. And it connects to your universal hub with these RJ45s. Okay, there's just one more screw to fit, and that is to fit this 25mm M4 countersunk through fixed bracket 1 here into this eccentric clamp. So it's eccentric because the screw hole is not in the center, it's offset, and in fact the version you've got has got 3 holes to give you more flexibility, and it allows you to clamp this bracket over a table of varying thicknesses. So if you can imagine that, like desk I've got here is 25mm, which is just a little bit less than that gap there. I'll show you that. See? And then as you rotate, so what you can do is you can rotate the eccentric clamp. Once you've got it over the table, give it a good twist to get it tight, and then tighten up the screw, and you've got a good firm grip over that desk. And for a much thicker table, that's why I've adjusted this eccentric clamp with some different screw positions to allow you to cope with thicker and thinner table tops. Okay, so the final thing is to show you how to mount it. So let me move to a different camera position, and in fact I think a different room. Okay, so this is how we mount the lower Spitfire panel to the instrument panel mounting system. You need the instrument panel mounting system attached to a desk first of all. You perhaps have that already for the flaps lever. And then we use these fixing brackets. They clip on, and you want it about 1 centimetre gap here, like a thick finger. And then that goes along here and just presses in. I've taken a little tension off here. If that's clamped right down, you might find it hard to slot that in. And then the other one, the way you work it out is that there's some slots in the top here. I kind of get a rough idea what the position of this should be. About a fraction across. That should do it. And then slide this on. And the ball springs that were in the internal case here, they clip into a cavity on the fixing bracket, and you've got a good strong clamp down. Now, I didn't put the eccentric screw on the back, the eccentric clamp, because I've got the old version, which doesn't have the 3 holes, and I can't quite fit it over this desk. But it's kind of optional anyway, but it does help give a bit more rigidity, because when you are pressing these 2 buttons, you don't want too much flexing, and fixing that behind here and clamping it up takes away some of the flex. So that's how that's mounted, and then over the top you just drop in the blind flying panel, and then all that remains is to plug in the RJ45, connect it to your universal hub, and you are away. So that concludes this assembly video for the AuthentiKit Spitfire lower panel. Many thanks to the community for helping grow AuthentiKit into such an amazing freeware project, and in this case a particular thanks to Harry Armstrong, who designed most of this lower panel. My role, in fact, was just the mounting system. I did say that we've completed version 1 of the AuthentiKit Spitfire home cockpit now, but that does not mean we're finished with Spitfire parts. No, not at all. I've already shown you the magneto that is in development, and a fuel cock is coming, and there will also be upgraded versions of the flight stick and throttle. So make sure you're subscribed to hear about that at the earliest opportunity. The extra controls will require an expanded hub, and with luck we'll get that working during this year. And of course we'll have more Mosquito parts, Mustang parts, and even some fine German engineering in the very near future. So for now folks, that's all we've got, and I'll catch you next time.